to present this. And what I want to do is that I would like to discuss how we are on the land of the Lenape people. They cultivated the land. We are enjoying and appreciate the land. So for that particular piece, friends, let's give a few solids of worship and praise, right? For what they done. Not a memorial, but a celebration of what they did. Okay, and so now the next thing I want to tell you, and again, I'm going to go sort of back and forth with this presentation, is that I want us to now think about the moment that we are in, friends. We are now the day before inauguration, MLK's birthday. And let me tell you, I'm going to say this because I'm Southern and I'm from Mississippi, right? I'm from Mississippi in my cricket-letter eye, humpback eye. And I got to say, in Robert E. Lee Day. I know that sounds odd, but when you go down to Mississippi, guess what ended up happening? You got Martin Luther King Day and Robert E. Lee Day. Okay. And so you got the schools that don't really get down with MLK. They are fine with celebrating Robert E. Lee Day. And so what happens is so again, you got MLK. So tomorrow is MLK Day, but then it's also in areas like, again, down south. You got Robert E. Lee Day, and I'm going to actually sort of show you how these days here, and I just did a quick Google search. And again, I'm going to be doing that sort of throughout, so you can actually sort of see what I mean here to make this very live and interactive. I need for okay, so live and interactive. So again, what happens is in various states and statutes and the like sort, but people had Robert E. Lee Day. And on these days, like in Mississippi and Alabama and some parts of Florida, they sort of shut it down. And so you have in Mississippi and Alabama, they on the same day they celebrate Robert E. Lee Day and then also MLK Day. So now, and these are the other states that actually engage in that. So before I move forward, right, some any reactions to, again, I had to put that in so you can sort of get an understanding about the subject matter that I'm going to talk about. Because I'm going to talk about resistance and how we must resist, but then also I'm talking about how people resisted the resistance. This is what Freedom Summer is about. In reaction to MLK Day, Robert E. Lee Day, and now again, tomorrow is inauguration. So history has a strange way of working out things out of all day. The President Trump comes in, it's going to be on MLK's and Robert E. Lee birthday. So you got some Southerners who are going to be, yes, doing the hoedown, all right? Because they're going to say that it was spiritual. All white Southerners, it was spiritual and it was God's way of making these things happen. You understand that conversation is going on in my region. All right. So any reaction before I move forward? Any reaction? This is interaction.
That conversation, Tonya, hi, it's Anna, is going on other places too. The spirituality of the reelection of Donald J. Trump. So, and how it, as we know, is divinely, according to some people, ordained.
Exactly. And that's why I want you to know the context, you all, particularly this subject matter. The one reason I'm doing it in this very interactive and sort of bringing up things as spirit moves is because this is it's a conversation that we're about to have about understanding our nation in a deeper perspective. And I got to do that in just a few more minutes. All right. And so I do have a friend here, Nancy Wallace. She have checked in. She's from Dallas, Texas. Thank you, Nancy, for checking in. And your hand is up. Yes.
Hi, Tonya. Thank you so much for the recognition and thank you for allowing me to attend. I wanted to say, being from Tuskegee, Alabama, I'm very familiar with Robert E. Lee Day. And I'm very familiar with the differences of celebrations. And if you remember when President Barack Obama was getting ready to be inaugurated, there was also numerology associated with that, where the number 40 came up multiple times. The number 4 came up multiple times. And so people were linking that as well to spiritual connotation. So,
Well, thank you so much, Nancy. And I guess that's the way Nancy is now modeled exactly where I want this to go, right? Again, because this is not a lecture. This is a conversation about how we democratize America. And when you democratize America, it is an engagement. In a second, I'm going to talk about just that. And again, so I want people to come in and thank you. I didn't even Thank you, Nancy, for coming in and talking about, again, that real experience. And then, especially when we are saying white Southerners and Black Southerners, because one of the things that we have to understand is that right now, when people think about Southern, the way that the languages work, people actually think about white Southerners' experiences and not that of African Americans. Now, somewhat Mark said, I also heard that Trump was a test from God and evangelical Christians failed the test. Exactly. Those are the reasons why. So in the next few months, particularly in this very intro month, I want us to understand when people are talking and really having these types of, conversations as if the nation is really going to become one big church service around some things, particularly from certain groups, right? But I also want you to understand that's not new. When we look at the United Daughters of the Confederacy, when we look at the white citizen councils, and this is what this journey that we're about to take is going to sort of take us on. All right, Judy. So Judy was, thank you so much for inviting me. A few months ago, I gave a presentation about the United Daughters of the Confederacy at Kindle. And thank you, Judy, for inviting me that. So you have a comment?
Well, I do. I'm reading a brand new book called The Memory of 76. This is published by Yale University Press. It's fascinating because it's looking at all the different ways through our history that the American Revolution has been celebrated. And so I would encourage everybody, especially over the next period, to look and see where you see the uses of the insignia and the symbols. And the chapter that I read last night had to do with the Liberty Bell and all the places all around the country that it went on a tour, and all the different people who had stories about it and what it represented. And so it's just to say that history is no settled thing. It's going on around us all the time.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that. So we did get the Judy, could you basically also write that book, type it in the chat so
Yeah.
people can actually sort of have that as well. Okay. So again, this is the piece about this static piece, right? So let me tell you sort of how this origins happened. So 10 years ago, I had taken students out in it was like 2013, 2012, 2013. And what happens is they had we went on a civil rights tour, right? But I thought that it was more inconclusive than what needed to be. So what happens is Jonathan Friedman, my colleague who's at the Holocaust and Genocide program at Westchester, we sort of envisioned a program where we would have a very selective program where we would invite people in, right? They would apply and we would do a full ride for them. When I say full ride, I mean a full ride. And so what ended up happening is that we gave 3 students, it was a very competitive process. And so we paid for everything, right? I mean, from, even their incidentals. And we took them on this particular trip again, because the first time we went, we were sort of going through, and this time we also wanted to focus on African-American men. And so 3 students emerged. We had a graduate students, 2 undergraduates. And so what happens is that, and that's where we sort of start. So that's the background where it came through the Holocaust. This program was sponsored, this particular program, this civil rights tour, last time and this time was sponsored by the Holocaust and Genocide program at Westchester University. Okay. And so what happens is that, so Jonathan had it where, he said, Tonya, make it the way you do. And guess what, you all? Jonathan ended up getting COVID. So we were supposed to have a driver and we were supposed to have all of that. And guess what? And I'm going to say this because I'm going to go to my slide. I'm going to go sort of back and forth here. I had to become, and I have this on one of the slides, you all, and I'm going to now bring it up just 1 second. I had to become, and if you're familiar with this person, hopefully you will be, and you're going to see some other images that comes up, is that hopefully I had to become Mrs. Frizzle. But you see that this Mrs. Frizzle is brown skin. She's not white. So I had to become Mrs. Frizzle. And what happens is I had to take people on a magic school bus. And guess who had to do all the driving? You all, I drove 2,900 miles in 9 days. I was on that bus going right. And it was so funny because my goodness, I know that they were grasping, and because they were grasping their hearts several times and they were even asking me, Dr. T, can we drive? So it must have been something in there, right? And so they had to basically submit to my driving and the like. So, but you all, we had a ball, okay? But Mrs. Frizzle, who was not supposed, I didn't know that I was going to be driving this magic school bus until 2 days before we left. But you all, I did it. And that's one of the proudest accomplishments that I actually have, that I basically did that thing. Now, again, so I'm going to go sort of back and forth, but I do want to go to, for us to get to part of the presentation today here is that we must resist commemoration of Freedom Summer through travel with liberty and justice for all. Now, here I'm with one of my heroes. I am here at right now in Pennsylvania because of the legacy laid out by Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells. They now have given her a Pulitzer Prize. She even got a doll. And now guess what? She just got a what did she just get big? I just shared it with her grandson. She has something else that just came out. So she was an anti-lynching activist. My dissertation was on lynching. Lynching was very essential to my life because my grandmother used to tell my uncles as they left the house, remembered Emmett Till. And then that's going to become important in a second when we have a conversation in a few seconds. So what happens is I have such a large family. My grandmother had 11 children and she was one of 11. I thought that she was talking about a cousin. So one day I said, Mama, who is Emmett Till? He a relative? And she said, mm, mm, mm. And that was the first time in my life ever that I experienced this semblance. When my grandmother literally was with me and I was a kid, but she checked out. I knew it wasn't, something was different. And when she said down the South, you sort of learn. And I know Nancy, and I saw Felix on the phone. I know some Southerners on this call. Are you Southern? You know this, right? When somebody go, see, it's all in the So you learn very early to pick up nuance through sound. And when she said, I knew it wasn't good, see? And so I had to tap my grandmama and I said, Mama, the only way they knew that boy was through a ring on his finger. They lynched him. And my grandmother's having a conversation really with herself, but I'm just present. So I had to shake my grandmama and I said, Mama, because I called my grandmama Mama. And I knew that lynch wasn't good. It's the first time I ever heard lynching. I knew it wasn't good because of the way she acted, or the way she responded, rather. And I shook her, she came to two. And I said, Mama, what is lynching? She said, that's what white folks do when they crazy and they trying to make a point. So I end up getting older. I end up going to, when I went to Tougaloo College, I did a paper on, but we had to do a presentation, and my paper was on Emmett Till. And I learned more about the lynching, learning and going through that as a senior paper. And that senior paper came a master's and a doctorate. But it all got started through Ida B. Wells. because I looked up when I started to look at lynching, I ran across Ida B. Wells. Now I want you to know one thing. Here in Pennsylvania, you know Frederick Douglass. Down south, I did not know Frederick Douglass. I met Frederick Douglass because I grew up in a culture that told me that the Underground Railroad, as some of you already heard, was a criminal enterprise that denied people their property. And so therefore, they wouldn't tell stories in which if Frederick Douglass's narrative is challenging the lost cause narrative, because the slaves are supposed to be happy, then why would they want to run away from a system? So you have to understand that. So Frederick Douglass was minimized in the history that I learned. Because again, that means that there was a critique of slavery. And if there was a critique, then that means they couldn't have been happy darkies singing in the fields. And so therefore, when I learned Ida B. Wells, I read this pamphlet called Southern Horrors that she published in 1892. And there was a guy who had a paper, the thing there. And I went to a predominantly white high school, education system too. I'm from the Mississippi Gulf Coast and Gulfport. And what happens is that, so I said, who is this guy? Frederick Douglass. And so this is before the days of the internet. So I actually went in and got a book on Frederick Douglass and I read his narrative. And I was like, yo, that was something interesting. So I met Frederick Douglass, not through his narrative, but through the Underground Railroad and that type of narrative. I met Frederick Douglass through Ida B. Wells's work because he did the preface for it. And so I learned Frederick Douglass through his work in lynching, not his work in slavery initially, because Ida B. Wells was talking about lynching. And so here, this is Ida B. Wells. This is in Memphis, Tennessee. This is a place called, this is across from the place in which she condemned lynching. It's called The Curve. And there's a restaurant and a mural that's there. And you can, in a second, we'll see some pictures from the people, the People's Grocery. And so there I'm with Ida B, but this is in Holly Springs, Mississippi. So notice I went from, this is Memphis, Tennessee, in Holly Springs, Mississippi. And there's a marker there because that's where Ida B. Wells was born. And so a lot of the history now really picks up on Ida B. Wells and her anti-lynching cause, right? Because what she did was lynching was so normalized. Even though in her lifetime, she did not see an end to lynching, what she did see was an end to the normalization of lynching, because lynching was normalized in the South as a good thing, a good practice of white Southerners. If they were good white Southerners, then they were, if they were good white Southerners, then they, follow that. They went to this particular ideology. All right. And I'm glad that you all are sharing some books in the chat. Now, so let me, again, go to this next slide because this is what I wanted to acknowledge the land. And then here is what I want to now sort of focus on here about what I want you to take out of this talk. And then I'm going to go to where we traveled, why we traveled. And again, I'm going to try to make room for question and answers. All right, so number one was that I want us to see that we're going to go through this journey of the American South, my beloved American South, because like Langston Hughes said, I too sing America. And to discuss the impact that Blacks and their allies made at fostering democracy. So one of the things I want you to understand is that Black people have been at the forefront. Not only did we build economically the company, I mean, you take all American economy, and many of you are Quakers, so I know you read. If you take all, and you already know this fact, but I'm still going to state it. If you take all of American economy, the most valuable asset at the eve of the American Civil War were Black people, period, point blank, undisputed. If you take all of Americans' railroads, banks, and everything, because the banks was actually tied up into slavery. That's why it was such a hard fight. That's why we went to a civil war, right? It's because the economy was in those 4 million people. And if you put that that economy and today's currency, I think it's like what, 92 billion dollars. So, I mean, it was in that number. It's in that particular number. So when you start to look at this idea that this is these group of people, but it was their agency, the fact that Quakers got a testimony because Black people have a testimony. Remember, the first abolitionists were not the proper nouns that we know. It was the person, the enslaved person, who put one foot in front of the other. That was the first thing. That's what caused it. And so in many ways, they tested or made Quakers test their testimony, their witness, their resolutions, right? Their ideology by putting one foot in front of the other. And so therefore, when I say Black and their allies, I want you to understand just that, right? And so again, so Blacks are in not only the story of democracy, the story of, the economy, but we're sort of, our footprint is everywhere. And I'm looking at the time and making sure that I'm going to get through these points here. The next piece is that the Constitution, I'm speaking at the Constitution Center for the fourth time. Can you believe a girl from Gulfport, Mississippi is talking about the Constitution, which is one of my favorite documents? Yes, the Constitution is one of my favorite documents. And if you ever heard my talk on the United Daughters of the Confederacy, you would understand why I say that. The United States Constitution, that enduring, remarkable document that we have, until the 1970s, Blacks were very much into that Constitution. Frederick Douglass, you talking about Thurgood Marshall and everybody who was somebody, Bayard Rustin, everyone sort of saw this story of the Constitution being a liberating document. The Confederates did not, but that's for a whole different lecture. So the reason that they would create their own, Constitution is because they thought the Constitution was too liberal. Does that begin to sound familiar? And so they wanted to do what? They politicized it and they create their own. But the one thing about the Constitution, the remarkable document that it is that it is not self-enforcing. I want us to understand what that means. We, the people. I'm going to pause there. We, the people. So we, the people, make the story and make that document come alive. It's ideas. It's a vision. It's a hope. Just like I have a dream. And so therefore, right, it's not self-enforcing. We are the enforcing. And then therefore, I just wanted to say, so with that, with Blacks democratizing America, and that when you sort of look at in any liberal white person who allied Blacks, they were a threat to that status, that white Southern status quo, and also the status quo of whites throughout America. So there was a pushback to that status quo. And two of the things that I am proposing is that I want us to do several things. I'm going to put in the chat. It's something I want you to sign up for. And it's called the calendar of injustice. The calendar of injustice. I have it here in the chat. The calendar of racial injustice. In a second, when I go through some of the pieces, that's the images that I'm going to go through, this calendar of injustice comes from Brian Stevenson's work, and it's down in Montgomery, Alabama, called the Equal Justice Initiative, right? And here is what you're going to get. You can see things from the Equal Justice Initiative. It talks about various ideas about looking at confronting America's racial injustice so we can repair, right, this legacy that we have and have a conversation. So when you sign up for this information, and what it's going to do is going to come to your email every morning, and you're going to get a story of American injustice. Now, why is this important? Because oftentimes when we learn American history, we always learn the trajectory up. We're always getting better, baby. We always are going up like the Jeffersons, right? Moving on up to the east side. We just get better and better. But yet and still, we have these moments where we can see people get elected by racializing, by using all type of wolf whistling, and then sometimes just coming out dog whistling, or just sometimes coming out and saying it. And so therefore, this calendar of injustice, what Brian Stevenson is doing here is showing that every day he can show you in American history accounts on, over years, accounts of injustice. So the injustices are actually what shapes our ecosystem, not really the justices, because the justices are always confronted, right? And then there's normally some setbacks. So right now, when you sort of sign up for this, you'll see like on the first day here, you got the emancipation, and he talks about a lynching. He talked about Alcatraz, about Native Americans who were there. And so you will get a different understanding, like the loving. So every day in history, like so for today, if you had signed up for this, you would have learned about white mobs attacking Filipino farm workers in California in 1930. So every day delivered straight to your calendar will be a story of an injustice. And when you sort of look at this particular piece and click on there, and then what happens is that it'll tell you the history of it, right? And they'll tell you sort of an understanding of it and whatever updates there were, to that particular piece. So here, again, they suffered this injustice and about the anti-Filipino violence that emerged and erupted that day. And then in 33, they actually introduced legislation that, denied people of Filipino and white residents. And then also in 1934, you talk about requests from they reduced the Filipino immigration to the United States to just 50 people a year. And then in 2011, California, they apologized for it. So what you get is that you get the entire history up until the current time. And again, so that's one of the things that I want you to sign up for, if you don't mind, because I'm going to go back to this. And I want you also to look at this particular book. I want you to buy this book and read this book. It's Bayard Rustin's A Legacy of Protest in Politics. It was just published last year in 2024. I signed it in my class that I had on urban justice, and the students love this book. And it is like various essays on Rustin coming from a different perspective, right? And one of the things I want us to do then is that when we meet again, right? When we meet again, like maybe having a presentation in June, right? Like during Juneteenth, is that we can talk about this book for Rustin, but then also how was it to sort of see that every day in America, you can learn a story of injustice and how the injustice can be either protracted or expanded, protracted or expanded. So it's living history, right? Because we have an activist court now. The Supreme Court is activist, right? It's polarizing. At the same time, last summer, for example, where you have the expansion and liberty was defined as being able to have guns, but at the same time, women were protracted in the sense that they lost some of their reproductive rights. So that's why I want you to read that calendar to see again but we've come a long way, but then in that long way, what does that mean? We have now schools that are fighting curriculum, right? So again, it's this idea, but that goes back to the idea that the Constitution is not self-enforcing. It's about interpretation, and that interpretation shapes our lives. That's why it's a remarkable document. In the next 4 years, trust and believe, because this president has an opportunity at the end of his presidency to have appointed 6 justices out of 9 to the Supreme Court. That's going to be very meaningful when it comes down to understanding, again, this living, remarkable document and how we interpret it and how it moves things forward. So with that said and done, I only have again, that's why I wanted to make it sort of interactive here, but I want us to go to something first. I want us to look at why I went down there in 64, why this year, this was the 60th anniversary of Freedom Summer. So what is Freedom Summer? The murders of Goodman, Cheney, and Swarner happened in Freedom Summer. What was Freedom Summer? Freedom Summer was this experiment in democracy where you had white students mainly, white students who were connected mainly, and wealthy white students. So wealthy, connected, many of them wealthy, not all, but many of them had connections in the like sort, because a Black person being murdered in Mississippi was not unusual, unfortunately. But the idea that if we're going to have people register to vote, right, and if anything should happen, if many of these white kids were to die, then the nation would look at it. And so Mississippi didn't disappoint. You had in Freedom Summer, there was roughly about 800 white students got trained by Blacks and said sort of how to deal with working in this rural parts of Mississippi and to basically look at voter registration. And before they even left, where they were trained in Ohio, they had to sign wills, WILLS, because the sort of the idea is that you understand that when you're going to Mississippi, you can be murdered. And unfortunately, Andrew Goodman, a young kid, he was enthusiastic about the civil rights movement. I want you to see how young he was. He was just 20. And he was one of the three core people, the Congress of Racial Equality. And they were murdered, him and James Chaney, who was an African-American male, and then also Michael Swarner. And so the murders of Chaney, Goodman, and Swarner happened during Freedom Summer as Black people, they were trying to get people registered to vote in the Mississippi Delta. And why this case is so important is because you can see the poster here about when these two white guys went, well, the two white guys, one being Jewish, Andy Goodman, and his family still works to this day. It's a Goodman Foundation for registering college students to vote. So you can look that up, the Andrew Goodman Foundation. And what happens is that the day he wasn't in Mississippi 24 hours before he was murdered, because he went along to sort of look at this investigation of a bombing of a church. And so so I took this opportunity of Freedom Summer and registering to vote, right, as the commemorative trip to do 60 years after. So let's now look at the landscape. So are we all good on why I went down to 2024, the funding of the trip, the meaning of the trip, and unfortunately, going through the blood of the slaughtered? Because we're going to talk about this trip was very emotional for the students because it was going through the blood of the slaughtered. The civil rights movement is a nonviolent movement. That's the tactic, but understand that's a tactic. But the civil rights movement is very violent. Does everybody get that? The civil rights movement is violent. The tactic was nonviolence. So the tactical approach and what happened are not the same. All right. So again, white Southerners had a very violent response to this Freedom Summer. And that's why you got Chaney, Goodman, and Swarner, but many other Blacks. In the trial for Emmett Till, the idea was, and I'm not going to use this, I'm going to use a pejorative word. I'm going to say use it. It's so many ends in the river. How do you know that's the end you're looking for? And when they were basically investigating Chaney, Goodman, and Schwerner, they were going, because they were found in the earthen dam, they started going through and combing through the swamps in Mississippi, and that's all they were doing was pulling out those Black bodies that had been dumped in the rivers. That's why the courageousness, by teaching students that the civil rights movement was a nonviolent movement, it's this idea that what they did wasn't as courageous, but we understand that they were dying and they were losing their homes and I can go into that conversation, but again, it's too much here. I want to sort of connect this story here to abolitionism, because in many ways, what the abolitionist movement did in the 19th century, the civil rights movement did in the 20th century. So, but here's a flip. You see this question. This was a very famous image that abolitionists used. And they used an image that it said, am I not a man and a brother? And again, I have a lot of interpretation about this. It's pragmatic, this image, because it's asking fellow whites. They use this image to build empathy and sympathy. And instead of connecting Blacks to their actual rights as a human being, and then with the Constitution, They, even with this image and even with abolitionism, they were allowing whites to be the arbiters, the interpreters of Black citizenship. So I want you to see this image. And again, it was a very powerful image during the abolitionist movement. I have a longer lecture on this. So please don't take its abbreviation and say, because it's a longer story with this. But I want you to see what Black people did. And I want to give you visual images. So Black people went, am I not? So there's the question in abolitionism to encourage people that said, am I not a man and a brother? And now I'm going to go back to my images here. This is something that, I'm sorry, let me take that out. I have it here. That we started to look at, sort of looking at voting rights, looking at how narratives sort of work, looking at, am I not? I mean, I am a man. I am a person who is a being. And I'm gonna see, I have it. I have that image here. I said I have it. Let it go. Okay. I'll pull it up. I'll bring it up here. Just one second. Because I want you to sort of see what we were sort of seeing in sort of real time. So when we went down to Memphis, where Martin Luther King was assassinated, and we went and we sort of saw how they had these images of saying, I am a man, not am I a brother, but I am a man. So I'm sorry. Let me go down just a little bit because I remember where I posted that at. So just one second. But if not, I'll do a so you just sort of see this piece where you have this, I am a man. So it goes from asking a question to making a definitive statement. Okay. And so what happens is that you have, so this journey on, the students learned that, that Black people, they didn't ask a question about who they were. They were very declarative about who they were. So not a question about, am I a man or a brother? But they went to, and they reversed the two words. And that's a different sentiment. Am I not, like as you can sort of see here, am I not a man? To I am a man. And these are the visual images that the students got to see. So I'm going to basically go on about 6 more minutes, and then I'll go into question and answers, and then sort of and hopefully I can use some of my pictures to sort of show you how, again, how that sort of works. So again, let me go back again to this magic school bus. So we were able to go, we started our trip off at the Jimmy Carter Museum. And the students initially, they were like, okay, Jimmy Carter. I mean, these are young kids. They from Philly. And they were like, what? We're going to start a civil rights journey out at the Jimmy Carter Museum. And I'm like, yeah, he's my favorite. We started this trip, you all, off on July the 4th. I was strategic on everything, right? I wanted us to have the understanding of America and Black people in the narrative of this nation. On July the 4th, we journeyed to Atlanta, Georgia, starting off our trip. All right. So we're here. And so the first stop was not the King Center, but the Jimmy Carter Museum, because I wanted them to see, and I have some images here. I wanted them to see how Jimmy Carter, when he came in, for example, he was a different white Southerner, right? So he was more enlightened, right? There I have this quote. I say to you quite frankly that the racial discrimination is over. The test of the government is not how popular it is with the powerful and privileged few, but how honesty and fairly it deals with the many who must depend upon it. And that was his inaugural address. And that didn't win Carter any friends. Okay. And so that's what I wanted to tell them is that, this story of democracy, how Black people are going to also need white allies. Right. And so that story sort of started off at the Jimmy Carter Museum with that. And then the sort of the next thing we do, I want you to understand that Carter was very strategic. So what he did was that his museum, his presidential library, so we started off at the presidential library. His presidential library is actually built on a plantation and also a Confederate battle site. And he wanted to take his museum and reimagine that particular type of space, right? One that could be very democratizing. The next piece is that we would go into the interior Georgia the next day, and then that's when we would go to areas like Bit Bethel AME, right? And how this was sort of a gateway, so how Blacks in their schools served multi purposes. So they were not only schools and churches and meeting spaces to talk about levels of activism. And then here, I love this picture of DeAndre sort of really taking in, the space. They have murals throughout, and we would stop at various murals about people who were involved in the movement. Like this is Ella Baker, right? And she was like the godmother of the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. We would have and go to places like John Lewis, where they have these murals across Atlanta. And, I took pictures of that. So again, we went from, so to give you an understanding of how we did the trip, I want you to understand exactly the spaces that we went to. We started off in Atlanta, then we went to Birmingham, and then from Birmingham, we went to Tupelo. Yes, I did show them the birthplace of Elvis Presley. Okay. So if you were wondering, right, I did show them the birthplace of Elvis Presley because poor white Southerners did quite a bit. They were a class that had unfortunately been duped by the elite to believe in the currency of their whiteness. So the white elite can have and keep power. So again, there's no way you could tell the story of, African Americans in the South and not tell the stories of white Southerners, poor white Southerners. Okay. So they got that. And again, how they would influence one another. And we talking about music and the like sort. So then from Tupelo, we went to Memphis, and I got to show you how I got the students here. Now, again, this is in Tom Bigby Park. This is an area that was named after a Black politician there. And let me just show you how this particular kid here, you can see that Tracy has on his Black history. I am Black history. They were so hyped. It was so good. So let's look at this right here. Let's see. Hi, we're right here at Tomley Park in Memphis, Tennessee. Right now, we're under a birthday gift to Memphis, right? This was actually given to Memphis to celebrate their birthday. And they have pickleball, they have basketball, and the like sort. And you all, we're out here looking at that wonderful, wonderful river, Mississippi. And of course, I'm from Mississippi. And so what happens is, and it's the Mississippi Indians, that's where we get the word Mississippi. And so like to them, like the Indians for cultivating,
I just had something.
We're gonna say,
I'm muted and my
when I was a kid, and we got Armani, who's a park ranger here. And guess what? He's the one filming. Say hey. Hey. Let him know where you from. Memphis 10. All right, so we all about to sing and give an ode to the mighty Mississippi. 1, 2. M-I. Cricket letter, I. Cricket letter, I. Humpback, I. All right, thank you so much, y'all. How does it feel right now? It's perfect. Breezy. Beautiful. Amazing. Take care. And thank you, Armani. Shout out to Armani. Okay, so that gives you a lot of our trips, you all. And I'm going to say this because I'm now going to get rid of this one. And I want to show you how I had them doing so many little things here that they were like, okay, Dr. T. And so like, here is one of the videos where I had them walking through various sites. So here's one. So we are now marching through, right? Like they were marching in the movement, right? I had them, we went to one of the places and we left Memphis we end up going to my alma mater, and I had them going through at Ole Miss. We have, and hold on, let me pause this. We have a monument to James Meredith, who integrated the school. And so 30 years before I got there. And so now we have this monument and memorial built to him. And I had them to go through the memorial. At the top of the memorial, it has opportunity, freedom, justice, and those type of inspirational words. So let's look at this. And as you can tell, I told them that I wanted them to come through. You can see opportunity up there. You may can't, but I can. Understand. So I had them coming through as if they were, again, following in the footsteps of people who were, you know, that they were in the legacy of. The same is here. We were at. All right, you all, we know that. Okay, so we went to Rootville, Mississippi, right? I'll tell you the route. I'm just trying to show you some videos here to sort of give you an understanding of how I had them to go through the steps, the actual steps. We went not only to the spaces, but I had them to engage in some of the activities. And so here, let this story tell itself. Fannie Lou was known for one. All right, you all, we know that Fannie Lou was known for one song and one song in particular. And as you can see, it is on her memorial statue. And y'all are ready? Let's go, team. 1, 2, 3, go. This little light. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. All right, so you can see, y'all, we were having fun with this. We also, another piece is that when we were at the Edis Pettis Bridge, right? I had them singing things like this too. Someday, oh, and so they got to see, again, I want to play that all the way through because one of the things that none of them had ever traveled down south, and they were amazed by, I was going to show you some of the food. They were amazed by the hospitality, right, of Southerners. They were also taken aback when we went to a place down in New Orleans. It was called the Whitney Museum. I'm going to tell you in a second how we went. And they learned what happened to African Americans when there were resistance to systems. And this particular uprising led to the beheading of African Americans in Louisiana. We went through, they saw pieces like this. We went to the Emmett Till. So another area of this is that they saw visually what lynching looked like. And all of the names, this is at the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, how you can just go, now look at this. I mean, imagine if you're in this museum and you really don't know about lynching. So you can hear the guys sound. They had sounds in the back. And the fact that I could keep walking, right? This is just in Mississippi alone, the number of lynchings.
You best watch where you're going now.
So I stopped it. Stopped it there because we could go on. Again, this is just from 49, but I wanted to just show you some visual imagery on just, you know, like how, you know, that worked, right? I wanted you to sort of see some of the imagery that they actually also saw. So would never let someone tell you that the Confederate flag is just merely a rebel flag. If you, that means that person doesn't know the history, because again, that flag is normally associated with antagonism and resistance. And you can see them lynching Martin Luther King, and it's very normalized because they have no problems showing their faces, right? And again, so they would see images like this. Here we are in the 16th Street Baptist Church, and they were at these particular pieces here. Again, so again, they witnessed and they were able to go into the interior of those types of spaces. We had church services. They went into the actual place in which is now the Church of God in Christ in Memphis. This is the Church of God in Christ headquarters is near where Martin Luther King was actually the night that he gave the I have a dreams. I've been to the mountaintop speech. And so this is where the Masonic Hall that he actually spoke that night. So they were able to see spaces like that, right? When we went to Ole Miss, my alma mater, they're now seeing how I'm going to do this. You're able to see how Ole Miss has now basically paid homage. Remember, I said history is living. So now Ole Miss, which is, was built by slave labor, and they tell you it was built by slave labor, how the students brought their enslaved workers with them. Now, I know we only have a few more minutes, so I just want to show you. I said that I was going to show you lynching at the curb, right? That was Stacks. Hold on one second. And then I'll go into questions. So again, I wanted to just give you an understanding. So let me go through, tell you where we went. We went from Atlanta to Birmingham to Tupelo to Memphis, Tennessee, and then Arkansas. Then we went to Holly Springs, where Ida B. Wells was born. And so we also went to the Mississippi Delta. And when we went to the Mississippi Delta, we went to the place in which Emmett Till, the alleged action happened at. But then we also went to the space in which Emmett Till's body, the river that he was thrown over. The students were sort of jarred through learning that Emmett Till, part of his murder was from African Americans who were forced by their employers to help them not help them kill, but help them get rid of the body of Emmett Till. And so the students were, sort of taken aback. And what happens is this museum that we went to is this one here. It's called the Emmett Till Historic Interpretive Center, and it's ran by Glendora. And one of the African-American men who were forced to help the two white men get rid of Till's body was his grandfather. And so they opened up this interpretive museum to tell that story. We end up going to, of course, Brian Stevenson's Equal Justice Initiative. The students, we end up going to they were able to see, these are different lynchings that at this particular spot. It's the museum of it's the National Justice and Peace Museum, and this is where they got the lynching pillars. Of course, we did the stuff with Martin Luther King and the like sort. We went again, so you saw Selma, but let me go back through it. So after we left Holly Springs, we went to the Mississippi Delta, like I said, to go see Emmett Till. Then we went to Jackson, Mississippi, and they were able to stand in front of the home of Medgar Evers, who was murdered, right, because he helped to integrate Ole Miss and that he was pushing for voting rights. And then we went to the Mississippi Museum, and then we went to Selma, and then we went to Montgomery. And while at Montgomery, we went to not only the Equal Justice Initiative. They have 3 campuses, a museum, an actual museum you go into, and then they actually have an outdoor museum, which was that lynching museum. And then they have a third one that opened at Juneteenth, and it's called a structural museum. And I got 3 minutes. So, and this is a picture of us. I want to tell you, you can see me pointing at my name. Well, Brian Stevenson has done some incredible work He's taken the name of, this is the first time this has ever been done in America. Brian Stevenson took the names that African Americans kept after slavery. And the lower the name, the more the people kept their name. And I'm here, and he has a computer where you can go in and see where your family's name is and where they were at different states. And mine was 100% accurate. And I have the students there, and you pay homage to your ancestors. And again, and my name is lowered. So that means the majority of us actually kept our enslaved name, Thames. And so he's done that work on that campus. We went back to Atlanta, where we went through Sweet Auburn. Then we went to New Orleans and went to the Whitney Plantation. Then we went to Gulfport, Mississippi, where they did the wade-ins so Blacks could integrate the pool. We were gone from July the 4th to July the 4th to July the 15th. And that concludes on our, are there any questions? I know we were going through a lot of pieces here. That's me and Rosa Parks. Again, we got Selma. And I love to see the students were able to go and see where Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, where they actually met in Selma, right, at this particular church in Selma. And so they were taken aback. And they love the South now. So are there any questions? And I like what Tracy has on this, walk into the room like God sent you. Are there any questions? Yes, Jesse. Yes, I love Megger and Murley. Yes.
This
Yes.
is Jim Nelson. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
A
Yes,
bit
Jen.
screwy this morning. I apologize for that. But anyway, is a white man wearing "I am a man" or "I am Black history"? Is that cultural appropriation, or would that be?
Well, I think that I am a man actually shows solidarity with particular the struggle of the Memphis sanitation workers and their desire to unionize. So I am a man. I don't think that that is cultural appropriation. That's why they actually sell it when you go to the museums throughout the South. They sell an I am a man shirt. So again, it's that nod to the history. Now, the I am a Black history, I wouldn't advise that at all. I would not advise that at all. Please don't wear that shirt, Jim. What happens is that, but you can do the other one as most definitely because it shows solidarity. Yes, Nancy. Oh, Nancy said, did you get to Tuskegee University? We did. We went to Tuskegee and they saw the lifting of the veil. And I told them the question about Booker T. Washington and how, he actually picked up, because of sexism, Ida B. Wells was supposed to pick up the mantle after Frederick Douglass died in 1895. Ida B. Wells led the most successful reform movement. However, because she was a woman, right? Because she was a woman, could you get that for me? Could you get that? Yeah. And so what happens is that because she was a woman, they didn't let her lead the Black folks, and they end up picking up Booker T. Washington. So again, it was sexism that stopped Ida B. Wells from emerging as the Black leader, because she had the most quintessential movement. The NAACP got started not to end segregation, not at all. The NAACP got started because they was trying to stop lynching. And they were actually motivated by a lynching that happened here in Cokesville, Pennsylvania, the lynching of Zachariah Walker. If it wasn't for the lynching of Zachariah Walker, we wouldn't have an NAACP. That's but now I can just tell you very quickly. Zachariah Walker, NAACP was fledgling. The lynching of Zachariah Walker helped them to mobilize funds, to do investigations, to stop lynching. And that's how the NAACP was able to underwrite themselves by taking on the case of lynching. And then it moved to segregation. Yes. Okay. Nancy, did you have another question? Because I have David. If not. Okay, we can't hear you, Nancy. You're stuck. So I'm going to go to David. David, okay, I'm sorry, Nancy, huh?
I'm sorry. Being from the deep South, I don't make assumptions on whether or not someone is Black or white, because we do have what is known as passe blanc. We have a lot of Black relatives that pass for white. So if someone is wearing a shirt that says Black, they could be.
True. True.
Their heritage.
That's true. That's true. Now I do have to say that. I got to, but again, you're gonna get some question and you better know your back, you better know your pedigree. You better know your genealogy. All right, that's a good one though, Nancy. You're right. That's 100% Nancy. Yes, David.
Hi, thank you for this. I've been trying to imagine, and I can't, what it must have been like for the students who were traveling through this with you. And I was wondering if any of them have written anything that kind of like a log that tracks their experience through this, and what it wound up meaning to them, and whether it changed their lives and how. Thanks.
Yes, all of them talked about how it changed profoundly and deeply. One of them was still in school, so he ended up taking some more classes under me, even though he didn't need to. What happens is that, so all of them, right now, DeAndre is doing some work that he would have never done on like the integration of Girard College. So again, where their interests are, we now have one of the students who were on the trip, Dag is now, he said, because of this trip, I owe it to my ancestors to move forward. So he's enrolling in he's going up to a doctoral program. And Tracy is now, again, because of this trip, both of them are moving towards doctoral programs. And DeAndre is now doing research, right, in the areas. And hopefully when he finished one paper that he started under me, and this about Girard College, we have a campus periodical is publication called Ramifications, and hopefully he can get that published there. So we're talking about doctoral programs, and all of them accredited going on this trip for that. You all, I know we are over time, and I know that Kenneth is have to go into their worship. Are there any more pressing questions? This is just to get us started, right? Because again, the idea, and I'm going to talk about more, I have over 1,000 images. I didn't talk about some of the areas. Like I said, we went to every place that was associated with the civil rights movement. Tracy couldn't get out of the car when we went to the Emmett Till site. Some of them, they didn't eat that day. And again, they didn't have a desire to eat when we were going to some of these places. They just said their minds were blown away at just the level. And so this is the importance of the curriculum. That is the reason there is a push not to teach certain narratives. Because if you have African Americans for students responding this way, can you imagine then when you are now that pop or that auntie or that uncle that you love so much, and now you find out that they are in some pictures. You know what I'm saying? They in some pictures now. And now, don't you understand that complicates that narrative? And so therefore, just like I told you, I started it off. I didn't learn Frederick Douglass because Frederick Douglass complicates the narrative of the happy slave, the enslaved. So again, that's those pieces about why these curriculums are so important, and going during this time and having these investigations, and how now we look at memorials, right? Now you can see how white Southerners for years had for decades, almost 100 years, had a lock on memorials. But now you see these memorials and these markers coming up, and these markers are telling students, questions about challenging the American narrative, the traditional American narrative. And so now you can see how that complicates. And so that's why I wanted you to see the spaces. And so this is why because who controls the curriculum controls American identity. Always know that. Who controls the curriculum? And the curriculum itself is a teacher of identity. And that's why it's so important. So at that, I'm sorry, if any more questions, if it's not any more questions, I know it's time to go. Thank you for your thank yous. And all right, thank you. And again, have you signed up for the Equal Justice Initiative? And let's just have it on record. How many of you would be interested in getting back together again on some level of programming around Juneteenth and talking about Bayard Rustin's book, A Legacy of Protest and Politics? All right. All right. You see that? You see these hands, Debbie? You see these claps? You got it, Deb? We got it. We got it. We got it. All right. So with that now, I'm gonna let you conclude.
Tonya,
I just want to so as you're doing this, you all, if you get an opportunity, if you're not going to MLK program, you did one today. because this is what the legacy of Martin Luther King looks like. And so I'm going to end with this. So right now it's in a line called in the National Negro Anthem, Lift Their Voice and Sing. In the second verse, it says, coming through the blood of the slaughtered. So I do want to end this program with we have to lift every voice and sing. I want you to think about those beautiful words. Lift every voice and sing. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies, right? Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Thank you, thank you, thank you.